Hey, how's it going? Brian here. And today I want to talk about what is hands down the most important number that you need to know if you are running ads in your business. There are a lot of metrics, a lot of things to look at that matter. However, there's only one number that matters most at the end of the day. So I want to break this down. And if you don't know this number, it's gonna change how you run ads, and it's gonna allow you to objectively say, is this ad successful? Is it not? Do I scale this ad? Do I turn this one off? It's gonna change completely how you optimize your ads and how you look at the data that you get back from the ads, okay? So let me dive right in. If you're listening to this, this is something that definitely you'll wanna watch, so we'll include the link to the video for this, but I'll do my best to describe everything as usual, just if you're only listening to describe all this, but it does help because of the numbers, because it's like a little bit of math. It's simple math, but sometimes it really helps to be able to see it right on the board. So we'll put the link in there. All right, so let's dive in and talk about this. So let me move this over and let's go here. Okay, so if you're running ads, then you've probably heard of this term, return on ad spend. So that's essentially your ROI on the ads. But instead of ROI, you'll hear the term ROAS, okay? ROAS, return on ad spend. And the calculation for this is actually really simple. All it is the revenue that you made from the ad divided by how much you spent on the ad, okay? So to put this in simple terms, let's say you ran an ad. You made $1,000 in revenue, gross revenue. We're not talking about profit. We're not talking about after ad spend, none of that. Just your actual sales that came in, $1,000. Then you're going to divide that by how much you spent to make that $1,000 in sales, right? So let's say you spent $500. So you spent $500 in ads on that ad, or $500 on that ad to make $1,000. So if you do that math, 1,000 divided by 500, you get 2. So your ROAS, your return on ad spend on that ad, or it could be at the ad level, the ad set level, the campaign level. The point is, you spent 500, you made 1,000 in sales, you had a ROAS of 2. So then the question naturally is, was that good? Is 2 a good ROAS? What is a good ROAS? And I get this question all the time if I'm speaking at an event or if I'm talking to a client. You know, especially when they're coming to us and they have some ad data and they just don't know, like, is this doing well? What should we do? You have to know, is that good or bad, right? And the answer is, it depends. And it depends on one number. It depends on your profit margin. So if in very general terms, if you have a very high profit margin, so on this $1,000 in sales, if a very high percentage, let's say 85% of that $1,000 was a profit, so after you factored in the cost of goods and the cost to fulfill that $1,000 worth of product, if you have, out of $1,000, let's say you have an 85% profit margin, right? So if you had 85%, that means that you had $850 in profit. So even looking at this, if you had $850 in profit and it cost you $500 to make $850 in profit here, right? Because 85% of 1,000 is $850. $850 minus $500 is an additional $350 in profit after all of your expenses are considered. So just without even breaking down the numbers and knowing what your break-even ROAS is and all that, would you say that was successful? I would say so. If you spent $500 to make $850 in like profit, that's pretty good, because after you factor in the ad spend, you're left with $350 in cash, in profit, and you did that while buying new customers into your business, right? And a whole host of other things. You built your list with non-buyers who then you can convert later on through email marketing. But let's keep it kind of simple for now. All right, so we've got a high margin will require a lower ROAS, right? A low margin, let's say you have a very low margin, 10% on the $1,000. Well, then you made, because let's say you have a really expensive product and it costs a lot to fulfill, it's very heavy, costs a lot for shipping. So you made $100 in profit on $1,000 in sales. So you spent $500 to make 100 in profit. That's not a very good trade-off. I would say that's actually pretty bad, right? Now, if you have a model, this is one exception. If you have a very low margin, but you know that the lifetime value, so let's say it's like a monthly recurring revenue stream. and every month you're making a sale, you may be willing, especially if you have capital up front, that you can afford to lose today to gain in the long run, right? If you can do that, you may be willing to take a loss. You will tolerate a lower return on ad spend, a return on ad spend that is lower than your break-even point. And by break-even, I mean the point where you make no money and you lose no money. You literally completely break even, but you acquired a customer for free, okay? So you may be willing to take lower than the break even because you know in time you're gonna recoup the loss plus make a profit. So this model is very popular in software. That's why they'll get a lot of funding up front. You hear about these companies that have never turned a profit, but they're valued at, $20 million or $50 million or $1 billion. They raise a lot of money. So now they have a ton of capital to go out and just acquire customers. And they're making a bet that in time, a year from now, 2 years from now, they'll turn a profit. So they literally are making this trade-off, spending 500 to make 100, spending 500 to make 100 to do this. Now, the only way you can do this, obviously, is if you have a lot of cash on hand because you're having to borrow from the future to grow the book of business today. For most of us, that's not an option, right? We can maybe borrow 30 days into the future, but certainly not a year into the future to finally break even 12 months from now. It's more common that you're going to want to break even right now and even make money right now. And if you can figure that out, then you've essentially turned your business into an ATM, and the ads turned into an ATM. You spend 500, you make 850. You spend 500, you make 850, right? That's a good thing. Those you scale. So the reason I'm breaking this down is because ultimately, to answer the question, what is a good ROAS, it's going to completely depend on what this profit margin is. So there's a term that we've coined internally that we call the B ROAS, your break-even ROAS. So which number is going to be the point where you make $0, okay? But you get the customers and you get all the other benefits. You get impressions, brand building, you get people who didn't buy, but you're going to be able to convert later on. And then you have buyers that you'll be able to convert later on as well. So there's all things that happen, but let's say at the very least, you bought customers, but made $0. That would be your break-even ROAS. Now, anything above that number means that you made money acquiring the customers. Anything below that number, that break-even ROAS, which we're going to calculate in a second, anything below that break-even number is it means that you took a loss. You lost money. So we'll put this here. Okay, that's a loss. Now again, I explained that may not always be a bad thing. However, what we're aiming for, and what I would encourage you to aim for, is to always be at or above this break-even number. It's what we aim for with all of our clients. And I can tell you the ones that we're able to scale very quickly, where we're able to go from, thousands a month to literally millions a month, to hundreds of thousands, to millions a month, it's because we find an ad or an ad campaign that we're at break even or better, and typically we're above break even, which allows us to just pour fuel on the fire and acquire customers and build up the list and build everything else and get brand exposure and all those things. So then that leaves the big question: how do you figure out this break even ROAS number, this B ROAS? And it's actually really simple, okay? All you have to do is you have to take 1, so the number 1, and divide it by, on a percentage basis, your profit margin. So on a percentage basis, what I mean by that is if you have a 50% profit margin, so after you take cost of goods and you deduct, you take the revenue, you remove the cost of goods, you remove the shipping expense, the packaging, you're going to have some variable expenses, some fixed expenses. When you figure that all out, you're going to have a profit margin. So let's say you came up with 50% profit margin. So if you sell something for $50, when it's all said and done, you've got $25 of profit left over, okay? So 50% profit margin. So then you're going to take that and you're going to put that in the denominator of this equation, 1 divided by the percentage. So in this case, it would be 1 divided by 50%, which equals 2, which means your break-even point, the point right here, change change colors here. All right, so the point right here where you break even, in this case, is a 2. So any ROAS at 2 or better means you broke even or made money. Anything below 2 means you lost money. And now if we use an example, if we just look at the numbers here, okay, it all makes sense. You made $1,000 in sales in this other example that I started with, right? $1,000 in sales. You have a 50% margin. So we'll talk about the ad spend in a second. You have a 50% margin. So that times 50% equals $500 in profit. So the $1,000 you made, 500 of it was profit, but then we got to deduct the $500 in ad spend to make that $500 in profit, and we get 0. We break even. If your ROAS, let's use an extreme example here, if your ROAS was, instead of $500 in ad spend, your ROAS was, and it actually isn't extreme. I was going to use something very extreme so that the math would work out and I wouldn't have to bust out a calculator. But let's say with that same $1,000 in revenue, you spent $333 in ad spend. So 1,000 divided by 333 is a 3 ROAS. So again, somebody might ask, like, is 3 a good ROAS? I heard 3 is really good. I know people who have a 1.8 and they're happy with that, so 3 must be good. Well, 3 might be good if you have a 10% profit margin. Remember that extreme example where I said $1,000 in sales, only $100 in profit. Your break-even ROAS is 1 divided by 10%, which is 10. So your break-even point is 10. 3 is way below 10, right? So you're losing a lot of money on that initial sale. But if your profit margin is 50%, your break-even is 2. 3 is higher than 2, which means we're golden, right? We like that. Thumbs up. And if you do the math here, you'll see that. You take $1,000 times the same 50%, because that's your margin. So you're left with $500. Then we're gonna deduct the $333 in ad spend that we said we had to spend to make that $500 in profit, and we're left with what, $167? So we're left with, I think my math's right, yeah, we're left with $167 of profit, pure profit on the front end while we acquired customers. And if we've optimized, and I've talked about this in another video, is how you optimize your entire business, your brand, how you build the framework we use to look at building a brand. If you've optimized all those other pieces, you've collected a lot more than just the customers, right? And you've made money while doing it. So if you're looking at ad decisions, right, you're saying, all right, this is a good ad, this is not a good ad, this is a good ad, this is not a good ad. We're going to scale this one, turn this one off. This is the number to look at. But in order to decide thumbs up, thumbs down, green light, yellow light being neutral, we're not sure, but we're going to kind of let it ride for a little bit, or red light, definitely not good. The way you make that decision is based on what your break-even ROAS is. So to put it in really simple terms, green light is above break-even, right? Yellow light is at break even. Can't really see that yellow, but you get the picture. And red light is below that. So that's going to be, at a basic level. Now, of course, there's more nuance to this, and profit margins can vary by offer, and we have to look at lifetime value. We have to look at your conversion rate on the back end, all kinds of things. How do we optimize, your average order profit? All these things. There's a lot of elements that go into this, but at its simplest, in its simplest form, what you're looking is, am I above, at, or below? But the only way you can truly gauge if this is a successful campaign and if you should be optimizing, keeping it on or turning it off, is you have to know what your ROAS is and you have to know what your break-even ROAS is. Now, there's other numbers in the funnel, in the ad funnel, that are really important. We could talk about that at some other time, and I can break those down. There's soft stats, hard stats. But at the end of the day, when we're talking about the most important number, this break-even ROAS is absolutely key, and I encourage you to go. Really, the process is easy. Go figure out what's your profit margin, step 1. Right? Profit margin. Step 2, take 1 divided by your profit margin. That's step 2. Now you have your break-even ROAS. Step 3, go look at your ads and gauge their success on this break-even ROAS number. Are you at, above, or below? I hope that helps you. This is one of the most important things we do straight out of the gate with our clients. And I can tell you that a lot of people, if you go to a conference, if you go to e-commerce conference and you talk about this, and it's not just e-commerce, right? It's anybody who runs ads. I mean, we talk about e-commerce primarily here, but if you go to a marketing conference, say, hey, what's your break-even ROAS? I mean, most of the time people will look at you like you have two heads. Be like, what are you talking about? It's a super important number. Hopefully you can see why this is so important. And I hope you take the time to go figure this out and start using this in your ad decisions. All right. Have a great rest of your day, and I'll talk to you soon. All right.